If your home is a listed building or quirky or unusual and you don't want the sale of it to take forever, are you actually forced into selling it by auction or to a cash buyer? Well, that is the question the owners of a listed form of vicarage asked me this week, and the answer may have saved them somewhere between £50,000 and £90,000. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the full consultation, including the options we ruled out, why we ruled them out, and the 6-step plan we built instead to sell a property like this one. So these sellers had been in their home for the best part of 20 years. Lovely, unusual place, an old form of vicarage, now split into 3 homes. So theirs is semi-detached on one side and the other side is 2 flats, and it came with a list of quirks that had them worried. So first, it was a flying freehold, which means part of their first floor sits over a communal hallway. So if you've not come across the term, it just means part of the property hangs over space you don't own, and it's exactly the kind of thing that makes buyer solicitors ask a lot of questions. There's some damp as well, ironically, mostly in the newer additions rather than the original building, partly because the stone wall was cement rendered years ago, which stops the stone breathing. The wooden windows need replacing as well, £600 to £1,000 each, and because it's a listed building, most of the work needs consent. There's an attic bedroom as well, unlikely to meet current building regulations. So when you add it all up, they were looking at roughly £30,000 to £40,000 of work over the next few years if they stayed. Now, they hadn't had the property value, but a smaller house nearby was on the market for £450, so we used £450 as a rough number purely to think through the options with. Now, here's the thing. The real question wasn't, can we sell? It was, if we do decide to go, are we forced down the auction or house buying company route because the property is so unusual? And I completely understood why they thought that. They bought the place themselves, so they knew firsthand how slow and complicated the legal side had been. And in their minds, the safe exits now were these guaranteed ones. So on the call, we took those 2 routes one at a time, and this is where it got useful. So I ran my own house buying company for years, and I competed against pretty much all the major players. So I know exactly how these companies look at a property like this from the inside. So these companies' whole business model is set up for 3 things. They want something easy to value. They need high confidence about what they'll actually be able to resell it for. Next, they want something quick to resell because their money's tied up until the property sells on, and the longer it takes, the more the holding costs eat into their profit. And third, they want something low risk. Anything that could complicate the legal work or scare a future buyer is a problem. So a characterful listed building with a flying freehold is the opposite of the cookie cutter stock they're set up for. They look at this one and go, how on earth do we value this? How do we know if it sells in 6 weeks or 18 months? And they don't know that. And whenever their risk goes up, their price comes down. And even on an ordinary home, the genuine house buying companies only pay about 80% of the market value. I've broken down exactly how much these companies pay in another video and why that's the figure. But on our £450,000 working, that's given away £90,000, and it's £90,000 for a fast sale. These sellers didn't even necessarily need, because they had no hard deadlines that they needed to work towards. And it's worth saying as well, it's not that there was a problem with the property, it just doesn't fit the business model of these companies. And if you really pushed one for an offer on a home like this, you get a number so low, there'd be no reason to even consider it. So one warning while we're on the subject of house buying companies, because this catches a lot of people out. Some of these companies will claim to pay 90% or 95% of the market value. Behind that claim, though, sits one of 2 things. Either it's a high initial offer that will drop later to what they really want to pay, or they're not really buying the property at all. It's presented like a purchase, but behind the scenes, they simply go looking for a buyer, the same as an estate agent would, except with fewer protections and an even lower chance of success. So that route was completely off the table, which brings us to the one they thought was actually made for unusual properties like theirs. So auctions get pitched as the natural home for quirky properties, and for some they genuinely are. But for me, the deciding factor in a situation like this is usually mortgageability. So if no lender would touch the property, a derelict building, heavy renovation project, pure development opportunity, then auction can be exactly the right route, because investors are the realistic market and they're comfortable bidding there. But this home was nothing like that. It was mortgageable, it's livable, it's lovable, and the normal market was still the best market for it. And that changes the maths completely. So first, in terms of price, so at auction, you typically expect to lose about 10 to 15% of the property's value. And on our working, that number's, 45 to 70 odd £1,000. Again, a big cost for speed these sellers didn't necessarily need. And second, and this is the bigger one, is certainty. So the eventual buyer for a property like this genuinely wants a period home and accepts everything that comes with it. Those buyers exist, but they're not common. So if you take sort of a rare buyer property and put it into a process most buyers can't participate in, which is the auction process, then your pool of potential buyers can potentially drop to zero. There's a real chance that it simply doesn't sell. Now, some sellers reason that a reserve price makes auction risk-free. We'll just set the reserve price at a number we're happy with. If it sells, it sells, and if not, it's no harm done, right? Well, unfortunately, that is not how it plays out. An auction that doesn't sell makes the next attempt harder, because when you then list next time around, buyers can see that failed auction on the property's online listing history, and it plants the exact question you least want in their heads, which is, what is wrong with it? So I've covered selling auction and whether or not it's worth it in more depth in another video. I'll link to it below. But if both of these guaranteed exits were wrong for them, what's left is the route they'd already written off. But in my opinion, none of the quirks on their list were deal breakers. The buyer for this home won't be hunting for an ordinary new build with nothing to do. There'll be someone who loves the character and the potential. And for those buyers, these sorts of quirks come with the territory anyway. So here is the plan we put together on the call, and 6 things. So 1, choose your agents on evidence and use 2 of them. So for an unusual property, agent choice matters even more than on almost any other sale, because you need someone who can coach nervous buyers through the quirks. So we look for agents with real market share in similar properties nearby, and then instruct the best 2 rather than just 1. Secondly, get to a realistic valuation, then start at the top of the realistic range. Overpricing is the expensive mistake here. So Rightmove's latest data, July 2026, shows that homes that sell without ever needing a price reduction find a buyer in about 36 days, whereas homes that need a reduction sit around for 127 days, 3.5 times longer. And with a long runway, you can start at the top of a realistic range, review after about 8 weeks of real viewings and feedback. 3, instruct a solicitor the day it goes on market, not when a buyer appears. So most estate agents would have you wait until you found a buyer to instruct your solicitors, but waiting is how delays creep in later, especially when something unexpected comes up. So get every form filled in early and ask your solicitor directly, what's a buyer's solicitor gonna raise here? It isn't the norm doing it this way, but it gets you ahead and prevents so many problems later. 4, consider a preemptive survey. So this one is optional, but a level 3 survey costs about £800 to £1,000, but it can mean nothing ambushes you mid-sale later on. And say a buyer tries to knock 25 grand off the price after their own survey, you'll know what's real and what's a try on. So most sellers skip this one and it's fine, but I felt in this situation, because of the quirks and the damp and other concerns that they had, it was probably worth doing. 5, when your buyer shows up, wrap them up in cotton wool. That's how I kind of think about it. Because this buyer is likely to be rare, I'd move fast the moment they appear, including potentially being open to selling first and renting for a while afterwards before they find their next home. Yes, it creates 2 moves instead of just 1, but you keep hold of this rare buyer and you become a chain-free buyer on your next purchase, which is such a strong negotiating position. There's a fair chance the deal you strike as a result can pay for the rental period and maybe more. So 6, budget 12 months for this move mentally. The average time from listing to completion is about 7 months. For an unusual property, planning for 12 months keeps the roller coaster of sort of the glimmers of hope and then the setbacks that come to nothing. It kind of keeps it from turning into rash decisions. But the kind of things in the list previously are what stop this becoming a 2-year move or a 3-year move. I speak with those people as well. And we definitely don't want that. So near the end of the call, we looked at their local market together. So similar sized homes, same price brand within 3 miles. And there were 94 properties available. Now, 37 of them had sales agreed, which is about 40%. And when we run that check around the country, we see typically percentages as low as 10% or up to about 50%. So despite everything unusual about the property, they were selling into a genuinely healthy market. You could kind of hear the relief on the call as we go through those numbers. So the property was never unsellable. It just needs the right plan and, unfortunately, as well, a bit of patience. And as the sellers kind of put it at the end of them, they felt like they kind of knew the answer. They felt auction was risky and the house buying companies and things, but going through it and really breaking down the reason of it can help make a much more certain decision and give you a lot more peace of mind as you do go through the process next. So if you are sitting personally on a listed, quirky or non-standard home, sort of quietly dreading the sale, the lessons from this call carry over. So first, unusual doesn't mean unsellable. It just means fewer and rarer buyers, and every part of your plan should kind of follow on from that fact. contract. Next, the mortgageability test decides the auction question. Like if your property can't get a mortgage at all, auction earns its place. But if a normal buyer could still mortgage it, auction usually makes things harder because it shrinks an already small pool of buyers. We Buy Any House companies want cookie cutter stock. A characterful property doesn't fit their model and their offers reflect that. And time is your biggest asset here. So with no deadline, you can trade patience for tens of thousands of pounds more. You know, in this situation, probably nearly 100 grand. Every property and every seller is different though, and the right route depends on what you value most. Is it speed or certainty or convenience or getting the highest price? So if you want a personal answer, I can suggest two things. So first, I've designed a free 60-second quiz that looks at your property and your priorities, then points you at the selling method that fits for you. The link for that is below in the description. And what you've just watched was a free consultation. I do these every week. They're genuinely free. There's no hard sell because most people just need a plan and not necessarily a service. If that sounds useful to you, that I've included a link below where you can book a call in with me personally. So feel free to do that if you want to chat about your sale as well. So thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.